Hi guys, Totallydubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review on the AOC AG273QX. Now this monitor, at least to me, is the successor of the AG271QX. So that monitor was 144Hz, 1440p FreeSync monitor. It can be found for around £370 in the UK and around $370 in the US. Links to my review and the buy links will be down in the description below. Now I don't have any buy links for this monitor at the moment because it's absolutely spanking brand new. However, the monitor can be found for around £470, at least that's what I've been told by AOC. Now what do you get? So this is a 27-inch monitor. It runs at 1440p. It has a VA panel that runs at 165Hz at maximum refresh rate. It has a quoted response time of 4 milliseconds, yet with MPRT boost that down to 1 millisecond. And it has display HDR 400 capabilities and therefore has AMD FreeSync 2 built in as well. And yes, before you ask, it does run on NVIDIA G-Sync as well. I'll get into all of that throughout this review. Now, considering the other specs that you might want to look at, it's got DisplayPort 1.2, HDMI 2.0, it's got microphone input, headphone output as well. It's also a VESA compatibility, so you can remove the stand and put it to a VESA stand or wall mount it. It's also got two 5-watt DTS sound enabled speakers, which actually do surprisingly well. Something I wasn't considering to be actually any impressive on a gaming monitor, but yet it did really well. And then it's also got a little gamepad, which is kind of like a quick mode select, which connects up to via a USB cable up to the monitor and allows you to quickly customize or quickly flick through 3 preset game modes or go through the OSD via a more intuitive way or easier way because it's on your desk rather than having to reach to the monitor's joystick, which can be found underneath the monitor here. Now speaking about that joystick which is found underneath, as you'll be able to see, there's a red illumination underneath it. Unfortunately, there was no way that this could be disabled, and it kind of coincides with the actual light effects that you get. Now the light effects can be quickly accessed via the joystick or go through the OSD, and if you enable it, what you'll find is that that LED becomes quite strong. Now this might not be a problem if you want that. However, if you do disable light effects altogether, which means that the ring at the back no longer illuminates, then this red LED will stay constant, which is slightly annoying given that it does reflect off my desk. I might be stupid, I might be missing a setting over here, but there's no way that I found that I could actually disable it. Now moving on from that, let's talk a bit about the design of the monitor. Now the monitor has a 3-sided borderless design, which is great to see. So the 27-inch monitor doesn't seem to be as big on a desk as another, like say 27-inch monitor with larger bezels. At the bottom you've got the AGON, which is AOC AGON logo, and other than that there's nothing else. I like the fact there's a joystick. As I said before, the light can be a little bit intrusive. And then on the sides you've got little plastic parts which come out for you to put your headphones or something that you'd like to store. Now, the little plastic bits are quite flimsy, but it's great to see that AOC actually includes it both on the right hand side and the left hand side for your convenience. In terms of USB inputs, it's also got USB type A 3.0 hub underneath the monitor. It can be a little bit annoying to access, but it does have that built in as well, so you can utilize that if you so wish. So in terms of what you get from the monitor itself, from the build quality section of it, it's pretty impressive. And this kind of extends down to the stand as well. The stand has a triangular shaped stand which is very sturdy, made out of metal, which is great to see in a kind of off grey type of colour. And the stand provides height adjustment, tilt adjustment, pivot adjustment and swivel as well. So you can do pretty much anything you want with it and be really comfortable and also have the right posture whilst you're going to be looking at the monitor. So now let's talk about image quality and how this VA panel actually performs. So given its VA panel technology, it does perform extremely well in terms of its contrast ratio. This monitor specifically has a 1900 to 1 contrast ratio, at least what I found through my calibrator. So for example, in this image, you'll be able to see really beautiful whites over here and then a nice deep black on the edges. You don't get too much light bleeding either on the side, on the corners, and more so the image just look quite realistic in some respect, even though it's probably been a little bit photoshopped when it was outputted. Again, in this image, you've got plenty of kind of green colors around the mountain range, and then you've got the skyline as well, which again looks quite nice. Overall, what I found is that the monitor is able to display a really nice contrast. And this also does extend in terms of the color accuracy, because out the box the color accuracy is actually stupendously good. When I say stupendously good, I mean that through a color calibrator calibrated to the sRGB standard using the sRGB setting through the OSD, this monitor hits an average Delta E of 1.41. Now for a gaming monitor, that is very impressive. Its maximum Delta E as well is 3.39, which yet again you can probably see it's all pretty much green throughout the board. Now in terms of max luminance, in other words the total brightness, this monitor is actually pretty bright. I found it to run at 345 nits with the sRGB mode enabled, which is really high, and it gets to up to 468 nits when it is running off sRGB mode and therefore 100% brightness. Now this is really great in order to hit the display HDR 400 standard, and it's great in order to have a very bright monitor if you have got a really bright sunlit room. However, put this monitor to the 0 brightness and what you'll find is that the monitor is still quite bright. So if people who are using this monitor in a very dark scenario, a dark room, and want a very dim monitor, this isn't it. Now moving on from that, let's talk about the sRGB values. Not to really talk about it too much, but it does hit 96.9% of the sRGB gamut coverage, but kind of overextends it with the gamut volume at 105%. You might think overextending is great, but that simply means that it's kind of outside in some respects of the sRGB gamut volume. Moving over to brightness uniformity and also backlight bleed and how it actually does throughout the panel. What I found is my particular model, and this is pure panel lottery, at the bottom left and bottom right hand side it had a little bit of variance. It was not really noticeable in everyday use, but it's something worth bearing in mind that you might notice a slight shift in certain corners. And again, this is purely lottery. Your panel might be completely different or perfect or worse, I can't really say. So in terms of image quality, what do I think? Well, being totally honest, this monitor is fantastic. It's perfect for a gamer, and in terms of if you are not a complete pro-grade designer or video editor or something like that, then you'll find that the image quality out the box, without needing any sort of calibration or software, is going to really impress in the sRGB mode through the OSD or through the warm mode that is preset on the OSD. So now, with that all out of the way, let's talk about the gaming performance. So first off, I want to talk about Counter-Strike, and the reason I want to talk about Counter-Strike first is simply because it's a competitive game, and people who are like myself, who are competitive gamers, will want to know, how does this monitor perform as a competitive monitor? Can you play competitive Counter-Strike on this monitor? Well, as this game loads up, I will say that this monitor actually does respond very well. I was surprised to see how well it actually does, and specifically on the strong overdrive setting, there's very minimal ghosting that occurred, and this was the same case when I loaded up Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the brand new one, and also when I played some Destiny 2. It was yet again very impressive. So I must say, it's very impressive to see how the monitor performs with the strongest overdrive setting, and specifically if you do want to enable NBR. So if you go into game settings and enable NBR, it will change the brightness momentarily, but you set it up, dial it up to 20, and then you'll notice that the motion blur kind of also reduces. And therefore, with strong overdrive setting, low input lag modes enabled, adaptive sync disabled, and NBR set to maximum, you do get a really good competitive monitor. Is this a monitor I would personally use for competitive gaming? Absolutely. But there are better monitors out there. From IPS to TN based panels, there's some other monitors that I would personally pick over it, which actually respond a little bit better. Don't get me wrong, this monitor is very good, and as I said before, I am quite picky when it comes to using a monitor for competitive gaming, but this is a monitor that I can see myself using for competitive gaming and not feel too, oh, this is a slow responding monitor or it's got very slow input lag. Far from it, it's actually very good. It's just that having tested over 140 different monitors, there are monitors out there that respond and have got a little bit lower input lag. So with competitive games out the way, what about for normal gamers, for more casual gamers, or people who don't want the fastest response time monitor, who don't play FPS games? Well, first of all, what I would recommend is actually disabling MBR altogether, enabling adaptive sync, and the reason why behind this is because it will enable either AMD FreeSync or NVIDIA G-Sync. Then I would also then go into the overdrive setting, leave it on strong or medium depending on the game that you have, leave low input lag enabled as well, and other than that, just leave the rest as it is. The next thing from there is for you to adjust per game. Now in my case I use Call of Duty Modern Warfare and also Destiny 2 as my casual games, and in this respect both of these games support HDR. Now in order to enable HDR, what you're going to have to do is enable HDR through the Windows display settings. Once you've done that, and of course you have to be on Windows 10 as well in order to enable that, once you do that, then once you launch a HDR enabled game, you'll have the option come up. Now of course, why should I just tell you, but why not show you? So this is Destiny 2. You can see HDR enabled is on over here, and this is how the image looks like. Now if I were to disable HDR through the settings, what you'll find is the image quality changes a little bit. Now it's not to say one is worse than the other, but what I did find is that with HDR disabled, the image quality is slightly better in terms of the color reproduction. However, the contrast that you get in terms of in the background, or let's say in this building over here, won't look as good. Now it might throw you off at the moment with the camera simply because as it is, the brightness gets independently adjusted when you enable or disable HDR, so it will look slightly different. But all I can say is that, and hopefully you can trust me, is the fact that HDR does do a relatively good job at actually displaying a proper HDR image. What I should note on this is the fact that most of the time when you do have HDR enabled on a HDR 400 standard monitor, it completely ruins the image. This is not the case with this AOC monitor. I think AOC have done a good job in terms of adapting that HDR standard and actually applying it to the monitor, and how it actually deals with it is actually very commendable. As I mentioned before, just to show you, in the image setup you've got display HDR which shows up, and that kind of differs from what you'd normally expect in the image section. So instead of having only 3 options, which is HDR, picture, movie and game, you have display HDR, which basically says I am running in HDR now, and this is the HDR standard. This monitor actually looks pretty good in HDR, so if you've got HDR enabled games, i.e. Destiny 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Mass Effect, games like that on PC, or if you've got a console, which I don't, but if you've got a console, even if you've got a Blu-ray disc with HDR, then what you'll find is that you are going to get some nice images being displayed through this monitor. Now I know you guys definitely thought I forgot about FreeSync and G-Sync. Absolutely not. It's another thing that I've tested. It does run with G-Sync. Now I've got an RTX 2080 Super graphics card and it's connected over DisplayPort running the latest NVIDIA drivers. As you can see on the top left hand side, the G-Sync indicator is enabled, and therefore I do have G-Sync running on this monitor pretty flawlessly. I did notice sometimes slight little shades of flickering, which wasn't flickering through the monitor, but it's almost like it was trying to adjust something. What I would like to mention over here is that yes, it runs G-Sync and it runs FreeSync, but what's more interesting is the fact it's running G-Sync simultaneously with HDR enabled as well, which is something that not many monitors can kind of shout about because they actually struggle to do this. You might notice that little flickering effect that I was mentioning before on the camera. I'm not sure if it's going to pick it up, but sometimes you can notice a little flickering. Now, if that is because it's struggling to handle the HDR signal with G-Sync at the same time simultaneously at 165 Hz, I don't know, but all I can say is that through my test, that's my kind of experience with HDR and or G-Sync enabled or disabled. If I were to disable G-Sync and or disable HDR, that flickering type of thing doesn't affect it. Just bear in mind this monitor isn't an official G-Sync certified monitor, so there might be some issues there. If you do have FreeSync, however, I think you won't have a problem whatsoever. In other words, if you've got an AMD graphics card, you won't have any problems. And again, just to re-emphasize the point, you can see in my NVIDIA control panel that the G-Sync option is enabled, and the fact that the resolution is running at 165 Hz at 1440p, which is its native resolution. So what is my overall verdict about this monitor? Well, truly, I've really struggled to find some flaws about it. I would honestly say the biggest flaw of this monitor is that red LED which sits underneath the monitor. Unless AOC correct me, that LED can't be disabled, and that would annoy me and it might annoy consumers buying it. But other than that, if you tape it up or you don't mind the LED being there, this monitor actually performs incredibly well throughout the range. As in, you've got a great build quality via the three-sided borderless design. You've got a great solid stand which provides full adjustments. You've got those little headphone adjustment things. You've got a joystick control. You've got a little gamepad thing to access the OSD. You've got a fully comprehensive OSD. Then you've got all the inputs and USB hub that you will want. Then you've got a panel that actually, in terms of color accuracy, is pretty much perfect for a gaming grade monitor. It's got a great refresh rate of 165 Hz. It's got a great perceived response time and input lag, at least for someone who's played over 2,000 hours of competitive Counter-Strike and reviewed over 140 different monitors. And then it's got HDR just to throw it on top of there, and also runs on NVIDIA G-Sync and AMD FreeSync 2 as well. Honestly, if you are a hardcore FPS gamer and you really want a low input lag monitor and don't care about all the other thrills that I talked about, there is one other monitor I can potentially think of that would outclass this monitor, and that's the Acer XF270HUA. My personal actual monitor and the monitor I would use for competitive Counter-Strike. Take away competitive Counter-Strike, it means that this AOC monitor might be one of the best monitors out there on the market for its spec and for its price. Well, let me know in the comments below what you think of this monitor. Were you thinking about it? Were you considering monitors like it? So there we go, guys. There you have it. There's my honest, unbiased, unpaid review. I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care and bye-bye.